I got an email from one of the girls I know earlier, and in the context of that email, uh, talking of, kind of generally talking about her relationship, the new boyfriend, and she'd written, "Oh, he won't allow me to do that." So just let that phrase, sentence, hang in the air a minute. He won't allow me to do that. Now, it doesn't take a look at my calendar to realize that we're now in 2019. And in terms of relationship, allow, permit, let, bearing in mind that I'm speaking with an adult, not a child who needs to ask parental permission to do something. This is a human being in her own right, being told what she can or cannot do. 2019. Right? This is not Dickensian age. This is not an age where women are still slaves to the kitchen sink or anything else. This is modern Britain in 2019. And a woman cannot, for herself, make decisions about what she can or isn't permitted to do by a man. He won't allow me to do that. And then we kind of wonder why women are still, in some circles, regarded as sort of second-class citizens. And really not having the intelligence to make their own decisions. Something about that which is just it doesn't fall into place. That a woman in 2019 still has to seek the approval or permission of another person to do something that she might like to do. Now, I find that really strange. Really strange. Because relationships are about being with someone who will empower you to live the life you want to live, you choose to live. Supporting that, whatever it is, obviously if it's like robbing banks and acts of terrorism and mugging old ladies, and it's a very different story. But the role of a partner in a relationship is to enable and empower that person to grow on their journey. Not your journey, their journey, as they would do with you. Because the nature of relationships is that that's what you do. You're enabling your partner to move on from you to another relationship. And it's about that healthy support which empowers them and enables them to do so. Now, that relationship might last a week, it might last a month, it might last 6 months, it might last a year, it might last until one of the partners dies. All right? Relationships are very different now to what they used to be 50 years ago when people sort of married for life. It's now very, very different. You know, that forget this kind of ideal of sort of fairy tale romances and we're going to be together forever and all this kind of stuff which we're sort of spoon-fed in a sense from being children, and women are particularly, I suppose, susceptible to this idea of fairy tale romances and getting married and having all this nice ceremonial stuff and a beautiful dress and living happily ever after. It's fairy tale. That is not the reality for most people nowadays. Marriage is nothing more than a legal contract. It isn't a necessity by any stretch of the imagination. It is a legal contract that binds you together as would a business partnership. You would sign a contract to say, this is what we're going to get out of it, this is what we're going to do, and these are the terms and conditions of doing it. But a lot of people, I think, this goes back to some kind of historical conditioning that, you know, you grow up and you get together with somebody and you get married, and this conditioned belief that it's just going to last forever. Things will last for as long as they last because either one of you has grown from the relationship, and that's when it comes to an end. Right? There is no forever in it. There's no fairy tale romance. You've really got to strip away that kind of touchy-feely bit and look at the reality and see it for what it is. And it might last 6 months, it might last 9 months. And then when you've grown from that relationship, your partner should be proud of the fact that they have enabled and empowered you to be able to leave them and to move on. And when they do move on, it's to look back and think, well, I love that person because this is what they did for me. This is how I've grown as a human being. This is how I've grown as a person. This is how I've moved on emotionally, physically, spiritually, in every single way. But when you look at the nature of relationships nowadays and how gripping they are on, how very codependent they are on one another, almost like a vice-like grip, that if one decides a relationship isn't going to work any longer, the other one turns inwards towards it. And then it becomes about them, not about the other person. People become very selfish and very ego-driven. Oh, what have I done to deserve this? What have you done to me? You're this, you're that, you're the other thing. Crazy negativity. Just think, if somebody's in a relationship and they've got children, and the two people drift apart, and they both look back and think, wow, that was the most mind-blowing, fantastic relationship, and I got this much from it, and it's just been incredible. Just think the difference once the egos are taken away Once the selfishness is taken away, how different the lives of the children would be. How more positive they would feel about the breakup of the parents, because the parents are actually really grateful for the time they spent with one another and what they've taken from it, how they've moved forward with it, how they've become a better person for it. But you look at the nature of relationships nowadays, and you see it on social media all the time. Oh, I'm now with this one, and then 2 months later, oh, I'm now with that one, and then all the kind of bitching and unnecessary stuff that goes with it. You hang on, or people are hanging on to the baggage, and there's resentment, and there's anger, and there's frustration, instead of just saying, that's really good. I've empowered you to be where you are now, enabled you to move on. That's a great thing to do for another human being. That's a kind of great personal sacrifice to make for another human being. But instead, you can see now why relationships don't last. It's that I'm scared to let go bit. What am I going to do without that person? Oh, I'm going to be on my own. How am I going to manage? Such negativity. So this is what we've come to as human beings now, where that's what we see. Instead of saying, do you know what? I've been blessed by having these children, these wonderful children. You've been blessed by having these wonderful children. Let's look at the good stuff. How we've enabled and empowered one another to get to where we are now, to the point where we can break up. We can go our separate ways, but you know what? We can still love one another because of what we've done for each other in the process of enabling each other to grow, to be better human beings. It's a time for like real soul searching and just saying, wow, I would never have got to where I am now without you being an active part in my life. And I'm really, really grateful for the experience. There's no such thing as good or bad or positive or negative. It's the learning opportunity that you take from it. What you learn about yourself as a human being, your beliefs, everything about you, all those really positive bits which take you forward to the next part of your life. So it doesn't matter if you're with somebody a week or a month or a year or 10 years, whatever. It's what you get from it while you are involved together. That's the awesome part about it. It's having that clarified emotional detachment, because it's the emotional attachment which creates the problems in the first place. Yes, it's good to have some emotional attachments, but the nature of relationships nowadays is that they can become very codependent. Very codependent. And that is unhealthy. And I have all kinds of conversations with people about relationships. And girls, a lot of girls. I'm speaking to one on Friday, Saturday, what we're now Monday, so it would be probably Friday. Oh, I've just split up from my partner. I can do this now. It's like, what? And this is the problem, that men mature emotionally a lot slower than females. Men don't really kind of get into their maturity until about 25 to 30. Until then, quite a lot are children dressed as men. And that's not being disrespectful, it's not being rude. Emotionally, it's a fact that they will throw their toys out of the pram at the least little thing, because men are more emotionally fragile. That's kind of the weakness of men nowadays. More emotionally fragile. Not all, but quite a lot. When I look at the relationship, and I speak with girls who say, well, I can do that now because I'm no longer with him. Well, the question is, why couldn't you do it while you were with him? Why wasn't he supporting you? Why isn't he embracing the opportunity, whatever it might be in life, that you had to do that? And say, oh yeah, you go for it. You have a blast. You enjoy yourself. You have fun with it. Huh? That's kind of what's missing. That's that crucial point that's missing now with a lot of men, I find, in the relationships with the females I speak with. Or it's, oh, I can't tell him I'm doing that. I'll have to keep that a secret. Why? If you have to keep it a secret, if you're not allowed to do something, what the hell are you doing in the relationship? Seriously. What are you doing in the relationship? If that's the case, if that's the issue, why are you not empowered within yourself to grow and to develop yourself as the individual you are? Because you're not born onto this planet to be a people pleaser. None of us are. We're born to please ourselves. If that happens to fit in with other people who think the same, great. If it doesn't, great. We're not going to please all of the people all of the time. Impossible to do that. Pointless exercise even trying. Something also very noticeable now is the ageism in this country. As I said, I was speaking to a girl Friday who said, oh, well, you're so much older than me. And I wasn't offended by it because I find it interesting. That kind of attitude is just interesting to me. So, and I said to her, actually, I would really like for you to see me as a human being, as a person, not as an age. And treat me, I'm treating you like a human being, as a person, not an age. So how is it you feel able to do that with me? Would you do it if I was black, or if I was disabled in some way? Or what about if I was homeless on the street? Would you treat me as somebody completely different? Or would you treat me as a human being? And I had sort of quite a long dialogue about this that I presented with her. It's like, what is your reasoning? Why are you not able to treat people as people? Why are you having to pigeonhole people like that? You're a certain age, or you're a certain colour, or you're homeless, or you're disabled. When you look or have conversations with the younger women, always the younger men that they have the problem with, because they kind of condition themselves into that little pigeonhole themselves. It's a bit of like a revolving door that they put themselves in, where they go from sort of one immature male to another immature male. And this girl was exactly the same on Friday. Highly intelligent in lots of ways, but couldn't see that And there's this very old saying, if you keep doing what you've always done, you're always going to get the same results. And that's her, like lots of other younger females who kind of go through this revolving door, who think their world somehow revolves around the kind of young men that they've always associated with. And then they wonder why they keep going back to square one all the time. And then they keep getting sort of, slightly more embittered about their exes. Well, I've got rid of him, but then they've got rid of him and they'll go and find another one. And then they find another one, taking their baggage from the previous relationship into the new relationship. And there might still be some, issues between her and the ex, or the ex and her, whatever. And then the new lover, the new boyfriend, partner, whatever you want to call it, the person, comes in and feels that they have to take over, that they have to kind of almost go to her defense and speak for her. And you think, why are you doing that? The reasoning, or your reasoning, might be in your mind quite sound, but while you're not empowering her to do the things she needs to do by herself, you're actually disempowering her. You're taking her power away and you're taking over. In a kind of really, again, almost patronizing way. Oh, she isn't capable of doing it, so I'll do it for her. How does that empower her to grow? Because what that person is really doing is putting himself in the place of the ex-partner, in that sense, by not empowering her, disempowering her. And it's kind of disrespectful to do that to any woman, to take that power away from them, where they're not intelligent enough to make their own choices, make their own decisions about things. So that would be another relationship that will probably last, 6 months or a year, and then fizzle out again. Then he'll go back to doing what he did before, because that's a kind of learned helplessness. And she'll go back to finding another one the same, because she's in that revolving door of learned helplessness. So you see the dichotomy and the dynamics of how relationships work nowadays, where people don't, or no longer, empower one another in a way which is right for that person as an individual. People can become very selfish, and it's kind of, well, I'm not going to empower you because my ego is going to be slightly damaged by it, or something along those sort of subconscious lines. And it's very, very odd when you take a step back and you look at it more logically. If I went out I wouldn't go out on the street and find, but if I had a conversation with somebody who was getting married, and I asked, why are you getting married? The answer would be, because I love him, her, possibly it. And then you ask the question again, why are you getting married? I just told you, I love him, her, it. So you ask the question again. So why are you getting married? And you can ask this a dozen times, and each time they're getting more and more agitated because they don't understand why you're asking the same question. but it's becoming infuriating. And they say, why are you asking me the same question? It's because you're giving me the same answer. What other answer can I give you? If people were to take the time out to actually think about it, how much of that getting married process would be through historical conditioning, because you've grown up as a child and you've seen auntie and uncle get married and brother or sister get married, and some, I don't know, great uncle or great aunt, just get married. You see this. So it becomes learnt behavior. And there's a kind of societal expectation on you that you're likely to do exactly the same. This is why you can say to other people, oh, I'm very sorry, or your grandfather died, or whatever, and they might come out with something. Oh yeah, well that's where all our family are buried. That's where I will be buried. So there's that kind of historical conditioning that goes with marriage. That isn't always really about love, and I'm not saying that it isn't about love. That, is part of it. But how much of it is because we are conditioned into believing that's the appropriate way to live. Not everyone's going to get married. I accept that. A lot of people just live together. That's what they do nowadays. But if part of that reasoning is through historical conditioning, there's also an argument to say that the reason marriages might break up, not all, but certainly a proportion of them might break up, is partly due to that expectation, that conditioning that says, well, when I grow up, I'm going to get married and I'm going to have a nice house and I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that, and we're going to live happy ever. It's that kind of happy ever after, like, fantasy thing that people are sold on again. That when the bubble actually bursts and reality bites, it's far and away different from that earlier, more romantic view that you had of it, that you were sold on, that you believed in. Very, very different. So I find the nature of relationships now incredibly interesting for those reasons, and understand why in some cases, men and women aren't necessarily matched to be together. This kind of all goes way, way back to sort of the whole Adam and Eve biblical thing. Adam with Eve. There's no Adam and Steve. It's kind of just Adam and Eve. So a lot of it, subconsciously, for a lot of people, but they won't even just think about it, goes back to that sort of culture of Adam and Eve and how men and women are supposed to be together. And then we kind of move on to the sort of fairy tale stuff to where we are nowadays. And there's a blur between that sort of fantasy land, romance and nice weddings and all the rest of it, and the reality of being together with somebody. And I kind of wonder how much of this is really thought through because of the conditioning, this historical conditioning that we have about being with somebody. And this kind of spending the rest of your life with somebody is kind of another insane sort of just fantasy idea, because it's not going to happen like that in most cases, not all cases, but in most cases. So we kind of end up getting sort of bitter and despondent about that kind of experience, because our fantasies have somewhere along the line been smashed to pieces by the reality. So I don't sort of get involved with people without really thinking it at a much deeper level. If I want to engage with a female, then it needs to be on that very empowering and supporting role. Whatever she does, whatever, as long as we're together at the end of the day and we're both happy, no issue. I don't do the arguments and the jealousy and all of that kind of crap, because it's actually harmful to the self. It's damaging to the self. And I'm very good at damaging myself because I smoke anyway. But I don't invite other people into my life in a way that's damaging. And I've got through my life without ever being married. It isn't something I believe in. Thankfully. It wouldn't work for me because I know myself and I know the way I am. And marriage is a no-no. And sometimes I just think to myself, God, if only other people thought the same way, what a better, happier, and actually more productive world this would be.